Hey everyone, hope everyone's having a good day today. So I want to do a quick follow-up video to my last video because I'm concerned that some of what I said is being misunderstood, and some of my opinions might be misconstrued. And I think that in part, and a mistake that I make is that I assume that everyone is watching my other videos, and so I think that that people coming to this channel are going to have a understanding of my views and are going to put what I say in any one video in perspective with my broader message on my channel, and that's my naiveness, because often people just come and watch one video, of course. So the last video received tons and tons of comments, and so I want to respond to some. And I want to assure people who maybe that video made them anxious or upset because they hold, for example, like a lot of modern product, or they really believe in the modern. So that video was really targeted at, and my frustrations were targeted at a few individuals within the hobby who have been really unethically, in my opinion, pushing product and pushing the idea that cards and booster boxes and all these things are not only going to go up forever, but that the modern product today is going to be, as valuable or more valuable than what the WotC and vintage product is right now. So we're talking about your like rainbow rares, your gold cards, all those cards are for sure going to be as valuable, are going to be like the Shining Charizards, the Shining Tyranitar, it's like the Shining cards from Neo Destiny, the Crystal cards from, and because they have the same pull rates, and because once those cards are 30 years old, they'll have the same growth rate and those sorts of things. And so I want to say very clearly, I am not saying definitively that that is impossible. I think it's very unlikely, and I'm going to make some arguments for why it's unlikely. But I'm not saying that anything is definitively impossible, with the exception of, like, in my last video, like GX, not even like rainbow rare cards, but just like normal GX cards from like random Pokemon being worth thousands of dollars. That I'm going to say isn't going to happen. And anyone who's saying that, you should disregard immediately. But so in this video, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about should you invest in modern, okay, and my thoughts on modern. And right before I jump into that, I do want to mention also that a lot of my frustrations are also the ways in which people are talking about Wizards of the Coast and Wizards of the Coast booster boxes. Nothing is a sure thing in this hobby. Everything is a risk. Everything could go down. I'm concerned that people who don't have the money to be spending on these products and buying these products are buying these products because they have been promised, or they've been given this false image that these are going to go up a huge amount and they're going to be able to, as I said in my previous video, retire on them or sell them and then go to school or start a family with that money. Lives can be ruined. Ruined might be a bit strong, but lives can be really negatively altered and affected by these sorts of things. And so I'm not saying that that's impossible. I'm not saying that it's impossible that these prices keep going up and that everything exponentially keeps going up. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that, like, understand that that is not necessarily going to happen and necessarily going to be the case. And my concern, as I was expressing in the last video, and really the core of it, whether people are buying Wizards of the Coast or modern product, is that I'm worried that lots of people are joining the hobby and are becoming sort of resellers and flippers, and are actually, the prices that they're buying these cards at, they're not buying these cards at these prices and then putting them in their collection. There are plenty of people doing that. I know a number of people in the comments did that, and I've talked to lots of people, so there are a number of people doing that. My concern is that there are an equal number or more people even who are really just coming into the hobby for a short period, are coming in trying to dump money into these things, push the price up, and then sell it and flip it. And that's fine as long as there are genuine collectors. Collectors should be, encouraged to buy these cards at whatever prices they want to buy it, as long as they can afford it, right? It's like if I want to spend a lot of money on a card, if I want to spend, as I was talking about in my last video, $5,000 on a card that was only $500, a few months ago, and I can afford the $5,000 and I love the card, all the power to you, and honestly, you're helping I'm glad you're in this hobby. You're helping increase the value of all of the cards, because you're saying that I love and care and want this card enough that I'm willing to pay that higher price. And I feel that way too, right? Like I don't feel personally like these cards aren't worth that much to me or wouldn't be worth that much to me. I'm not selling, the vast majority of my collection right now at these prices because they're worth more than that to me, and I think they can potentially go up in the future. That's not what I was saying in the last video. What I'm saying is concerning me is the reason people are buying these cards. I don't think that a lot of people, and I know that a number of people are buying these boxes and these cards right now for pure speculation on that they're going to go up and hoping to get a return, and that if that box value or that card started going down in value, they would panic and feel terrible. They wouldn't feel like, oh, okay, I purchased it for a little bit of a higher price and that's okay. And we have seen this pattern in Pokemon before. Crystal Charizard is a great example, but there are lots of examples where people were buying that card for speculation because it was going up in price. I remember it going, up to about $4,000 at one point, or in the 3s to 4s, before dropping back down to about the mid 2000s, because people were buying that up because there was a lot of excitement and hype around Skyridge and around that key card from Skyridge. And so people were buying that up with the idea that it's going to keep going up and they're going to flip it, right? And then eventually what happened is the flippers kept flipping it to other flippers, which moved it up to that 4,000. And then all of a sudden, one or a group of flippers were stuck with it because there were no more flippers willing to buy it at that higher price. And then it all came crashing down, back down to the collector base. So the only thing that is really going to sustain value in these cards over time is collectors, is people who really want these items and are willing to pay the high prices. If flippers and resellers are reselling it to other resellers and flippers, like that is a House of Cards situation that can collapse. And so that's what we have to be really careful with right now. And that is what I was talking about in my last video, that I'm, a few months ago, and when I first started this channel, I made my first video, and I made another video saying that I didn't feel like we were in a bubble, because I actually felt that a lot of new genuine collectors were coming in because I was engaging with them and talking with them. And that combined with the lack of PSA cards, PSA supply on the market was genuinely moving up the prices, because people understood. These were pretty educated people that I was talking to. They understood that the prices were going up a lot, and they wish they were here earlier. They wish they had rediscovered their love for Pokemon earlier when they could have bought them for cheaper. But that wasn't the reality, and they understood that. And so they realized that they had the money and they wanted the cards because they love the cards. And just realized that they love the cards. And so they knowledgeably were buying the cards at those higher prices. Okay? So if that is making up the most of the market still, and I hope it is, we're not in any danger. I think there still might be retraces, because I think more PSA cards are going to come onto the market because PSA is open again, and they have this insane backlog. For anyone who's following PSA, they have more cards now than they may ever have, in the history of their company right now, in terms of the amount of inventory they have to grade and get through. And a lot of those cards are going to be Pokemon cards, not just sports cards. So I want to make that very clear from the last video. Now, jumping into more of talking on Modern, because I think that people got the impression that I really didn't like Modern and thought that Modern wasn't a good investment. I want to talk a little bit more about my opinions on Modern. All right, so in my Modern video, which I suggest you can go back to and look at, which is where Rafi and I discussed our feelings on Modern and our experiences with Modern, I said in that video that I think that if you buy Modern booster boxes at about the price that they come out, 100, let's say 100 to 120, or 80, right? 80 if you get them right away, 80 to 120, even 80 to 150 probably. You're likely going to either not lose money or make some money on those boxes, okay? that's just the history of Pokemon. The same thing happens in Magic the Gathering. The same thing happens with these types of sealed product. Because people love Pokemon, I don't think all of a sudden all the interest in Pokemon is going to go away. And people love opening sealed product. And modern sealed product is so fun to open that people are willing to pay, you know, at least the amount that the distributor will sell them for it, you know, for the experience, even if the cards have no value inside, okay? So there isn't like this huge risk that you're gonna have to sell all of your box, at least right now. Now that could happen in the future. You know, it's not impossible with a set like Evolutions. If there's so much out there and so many people are hoarding it, and 10 years from now, Pokemon just doesn't become popular as much anymore, and really the market changes, and people only like the vintage anymore, let's just say theoretically, and maybe vintage falls off in price too. But I'm not saying this is gonna happen necessarily, but these are possibilities, okay? And I just want people to feel that and understand that, because they may be in this echo chamber of people saying that this is impossible and this can't happen, because this exact thing has happened in other collectible markets. All right, so people are buying, Evolutions, which there's so much Evolutions with this idea because they see the PSA cards are going up in value so much from that box. And if you're short-term buying Evolutions might see a spike. I don't know how much product is out there. I've talked a lot about Evolutions and the fact that, like, the distributor box, like, distributors are still trying to sell the boxes, and they're gonna all need to sell their boxes at their original prices, basically, before, like, the people who were, hoarding isn't the nicest word, but were really stockpiling, the collectors, your sort of average investor types, maybe we can say, who were like, Evolutions is such a cool set, I'm going to buy a bunch of these boxes and I'm going to hold them for years, and then I'm going to sell them at $200, $300, $400, $500. Then we have to start getting into those boxes, and probably a lot of people who have just been like having a bunch of that in their closet might be really eager to get rid of it. And so you're going to see those boxes going for $120 for a while, and then $150 and $200. And there's just a lot of product in there. And so it might take a while for it to move up. Now, those are just my opinions, though I do not have evidence for that. Those are not facts. Think through this stuff yourself and make your own opinions, okay? But those, I think, are those are educated guesses on what I think it might take for that to move up, okay? So one of the pros that I talked about for Modern in general in other videos, and I want to bring it back here because there is this dream scenario, right? And it's not a crazy dream, it's possible. And a lot of people are collecting Modern right now, and investing in Modern because they believe that this is going to happen, is that when the kids grow up, they're not going to want to invest in or collect Wizards of the Coast. They're going to want their childhood boxes because they're going to want those memories and the nostalgia that they have connected to these boxes now. I think that there's truth in that. I think that that's a good argument, but I would be very careful to assume that that means that these boxes are going to move a huge amount. And why I say that is because lots and lots of people right now are hoarding or putting away many of these Modern boxes, and that didn't happen to any sort of the same degree to the Wizards of the Coast. And so if we have the same amount of kids today who love Pokemon, let's say, as our generation, and wants to open up their childhood packs, there's going to be a lot more supply still out there to meet that demand, okay? So that's one important thing. The other important thing that I want to talk about, and so the prices are almost certainly never going to see the WotC level prices for that reason, because there's more demand. Second, the cards inside are not going to have the same expected value as the Wizards of the Coast cards that are inside, because there are going to be so many more graded of these Modern cards to those Wizards of the Coast cards. And so the fact that the cards inside these boxes in 10 years are not going to be worth as much as very, very likely, just with common sense, aren't going to be worth as much as those Wizards of the Coast cards, because there are so many more of those Modern cards. That is also going to keep the prices down on these boxes. Part of why the prices are so high on the Wizards of the Coast boxes is the expected value from opening the box. It's not just the nostalgia of having the box or wanting to open the box out of that great nostalgic experience, okay? Important things. Next point I want to make is Another thing to be worried about and concerned about, and you can see this in other hobbies, is something I'm going to call like box competition or set competition, driving demand for specific sets down. When you look at Wizards of the Coast, it's this very sort of like very sort of specific area that has its sort of like beginning and end point, and that won't ever be duplicated or replicated, and won't very likely have that first edition stamp. There are elements of that WotC era that sort of keep it its own separate thing within Pokemon, and gives it its own distinct feeling and connection to people, and its own distinct sort of entity, which helps it from being hurt by modern sets or modern sets competing with it. It's part of why I think that like kids today are the real hardcore collectors, if you're honest. Hardcore collectors are not just in this, they're not just spending a lot of money just for nostalgia. They are spending for nostalgia too, but they're also spending for rarity, they're spending for originals, they're spending for the best, they want the best, they want the first. They love Charizard, right? They love Charizard, and they have a real connections with that Burning Shadow Charizard. But do you think they're gonna, as a hardcore adult collector who has an understanding of finance and rarity and scarcity, I would argue that they're gonna want that first edition Charizard because they understand the history and they know it's that first rookie, Charizard, and they know that everyone it's a cross hobby Charizard. Everyone in many different collectible hobbies responds to that, and that's just exciting. And I don't think that the Burning Shadows Charizard, for example, which is the best Charizard in my opinion from that Sun and Moon era, is going to have that same excitement with it, even for the kids who opened that as a kid from a pack. Now, it's going to have a certain degree of excitement for sure, because maybe it was their first Charizard, because it was the first chase Charizard when they were a kid. Only time will tell about that. But if you look at other hobbies, that's what happened. Today, comic book collectors who are coming in, they still want the same comics that the comic book collectors, that every generation of comic book collectors wanted. They want the original. They want the first. They want the first, appearance, right? First appearance of whatever is their favorite superhero. Just like today, they're not going to want the 10th appearance of Charizard I'm arguing, right? My opinion. They're not going to want the 10th appearance of Charizard just because that's the Charizard they opened when they're a kid. They are going to want that, but they're not going to want it as much or pay as much because they know it's not as important or historical as the first Charizard that started the whole Charizard line. I hope that makes sense to people. So going back to that idea of box competition, and what I'm getting into with this is that when you look at modern sets, and as more modern sets come up, there's going to be more competition and more Charizards. There's going to be more and more and more and more and more Charizards. And all of those Charizards, I would argue, are going to compete with each other and are going to lower the price of each other. For example, if you look at the Rainbow Rare Charizards, there were multiple Rainbow Rare Charizards, right? There's the original that's by itself. The original has the most value because originals almost always in collectibles have the most value. And then you had, two other Rainbow Rare Charizards. Then you had the Hidden Fates Charizard, which was the first shiny, full art Charizard. In that sense, is going to have its distinction, and also had the same art as that Rainbow Rare. So the value of that Rainbow Rare Charizard helped connect those two Charizards. But if you look at like the Reshiram, Charizard, and the Brexin and Charizard, like those just don't have anywhere near the same value. Because people inherently understand, and even on an instinctual level, get that first is most collectible, even though it's the same rarity, right? Those cards have the same pull rate, roughly. Okay, so, and you could argue it's because Charizard is alone on a card versus Charizard is on a card with another Pokemon, and that could be... that could be a partial explanation too, but I would argue it's also because that Burning Shadows one was the first one. And so box competition. So the more of these boxes that are made, they're going to compete with each other. These Charizards are going to compete with each other. These boxes and sets are going to compete with each other. There's going to be lines and there's going to be times. And if you look at comic books, for example, like there's, the different eras in comic books that were basically talked about. And you see the early era, right? It's like you have, Golden Age, Silver, Bronze. You have all these different eras, and I'm not a comic book expert. I have a very, very basic overview of it just to, understand and see the patterns and hobbies. But the eras where there were tons of of product put out there, or a lot more product put out there, and the eras when that product was thought of as going to be super valuable. And so people hoarded those comics, and that's what happened to a lot of comics and why they have no value now. They hoarded those comics, and they hoarded them in really excellent condition and kept them in really excellent condition. Those today have not moved up in price at all, or moved up very little. You know, and I'm sure there are exceptions, and I'm not a comic book expert, but I know overall a lot of them haven't moved up, and a lot of them are just sitting in boxes collecting dust. And so that is a danger right now for Pokemon and for this, because what's going to happen is you have more of this modern product to begin with, and then you have so much different modern product that what am I supposed to collect? Am I going to buy every single box? How am I going to buy every single box? And how am I going to buy every single box for $5,000 is the other key point. The more product there is, the more, and if all of that product has the same traits to it, all of that product technically is, there's going to need to be enough money and enough interest in the hobby for any of that product to get to $3,000, $4,000, for example. It's all going to need to get to $3,000 to $4,000 across many generations, across many sets. And so those are important things to think about, unless a box has a very specific card. So we saw Flashfire Jump, for example. And we may see Burning Shadows outperform the other boxes because those cards had Charizards, because those cards had really Charizards that people really are going to be historical. For example, the Flashfire with that first full art Charizard, and the Burning Shadows maybe with that Rainbow Rare Charizard, maybe will go down as historic. It might not, right? You could make an argument that Rainbow Rare, as soon as other generations come out, and Rainbow Rares just get lost. And in 10 to 15 years, nobody cares about Rainbow Rares anymore, and nobody even has that much of a connection to it. Now, the reverse of that, right, is arguing that kids will, because they grew up with it and they'll always want it. But none of that is certain. And so I want you to, and the point of my last video, right, listen to people who are giving you arguments and not just telling you that things are certainly going to happen, and think for yourself and look at comic books, look at sports cards, look at other markets that had these types of patterns, and try to learn lessons from them so that you don't get yourself in trouble. That's for the investors. For the collectors, collect what you love, try to spend within your means, and try to take my advice so that you can hopefully meet your collecting goals in a financially smart way, and you don't overpay for certain items that then make it so that you can't get other items that you really want. All right. So, I think that's everything I wanted to cover today, just to make things really clear, and to summarize just that modern product, particularly sealed modern product, it could easily go up to $300, $400, $500, okay, in 10 years, let's say. It might not. It definitely might not. And it might even go down. It is possible, I'm going to throw it here, that Pokemon sealed product can actually go down, and if people aren't aware of that, they don't understand how markets work, because Pokemon could just tank and people could not want it, but these particular sealed boxes, and there could be so much supply that it just tanks. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is possible, okay? I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think most likely kids are going to want it, and I made this prediction in an earlier video. Kids are going to want it to some degree. People are going to want to open it again with their kids. And there's always going to be a connection. And I think Pokemon love is so strong and is going to be so consistent over the next few generations with more people entering the hobby that these booster boxes are going to go up in price. But I would be very surprised and worried if they went up more than $1,000 a box, or even more than maybe like $500, $600, $700. I think that would be a ton. And that would be way too much to pay for it right now. Way too much to pay for it right now. For any of this super, super modern stuff, unless it's a very specific set with a very specific Charizard or something like that. Potentially you could make an argument. Still, I think, pretty risky. And so, I would say, because of all of that seeing those $500 price points, might be a practical goal, a realistic goal for purchasing some of this product. Maybe that would mean that Pokemon that would be, like, to me, a very good best case scenario for a lot of these boxes. And again, I could be wrong, and Pokemon could just keep going up and up and up, but it would make me nervous. And so if you compare that, this is the negative part, guys. If you compare that, you could say, oh, I'm spending $100 and my box will be worth $500 in 10 years. that is an okay return. But if that's your best case scenario return, and you have to keep this box sealed, so you have to not open it, you have to put it in a somewhere in your house and store it somewhere where you forget it, and then you have to actually sell it and find a seller and go through the selling and be worried about being scamming. Like, there are a lot of things that I would argue make this not a very good investment vehicle, and not a very kind of like not super high reward, in my opinion, somewhat risky, like decent investment. Like, I think you'll probably make money, but is nothing to, you shouldn't be putting your primary investments in that, in my opinion. You know, if you look at the stock market, like obviously the stock market's been hit really bad with coronavirus and what's going on, but I mean, the NASDAQ now is, you know, near an all-time high. It was at an all-time high like a week ago or so. You know, so the stock market, if you just look at it, it's been around a lot longer, and it has that, you know, 8 to 12% growth rate. And if you compound that sort of exponentially, you know, each year, right, you get 8 to 12% each year, which then makes what you have more valuable, and then you get 8 to 12% of that higher amount the following year. And if you do the math on that, you'll actually would make more money than if in 10 years than if you were to buy this booster box, for example. And you'd have this liquid item that you can press a button and the stock sells immediately, so you don't have to worry about finding a seller. So those are my thoughts. Thanks again for watching. Hope this helped clarify things, and you know, stops people from panicking that maybe they bought moderate and they really shouldn't have, and realize that, like, you're fine, you don't have to worry. But probably don't put tens of thousands of dollars into this thinking that, you know, you're gonna strike it, you're gonna get hundreds of thousands or $1 million out of it. And I can't promise you, like, it would be unethical of me to say that I knew that for sure, but I'm laying out arguments, and I'm really doing this, guys, whether you believe me or not. I'm doing this because I'm concerned, and I care about people's experience in this hobby, and I want to create a community of like long-term collectors who enjoy it. And I'm concerned this sort of investor reseller mindset could damage the experience people have. All right, so I'll talk to you again soon, and take care.